Hey, beautiful chaos listeners. Remember that talk we had about neurodiversity back in episode 5?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, guess what? Today, we're doing deep dive, and it's a question that popped into my head after that episode.
Okay.
Was Leonardo da Vinci neurodivergent?
Hmm. That's a really interesting thought. I mean, just imagine that the mind behind, iconic works like Mona Lisa could have worked differently than what we consider the norm.
Exactly. And we've got a ton of sources here to kind of unpack all this.
Oh, wow.
We've got historical accounts, modern neuroscience research, there's a Novia documentary, even some contemporary artists chiming in, and even a YouTube video that connects Da Vinci to ADHD.
Wow. Okay.
So where do we even begin?
Well, I think a good place to start is that tension. The tension between Da Vinci's absolute genius. He created these incredible masterpieces, but he also was notorious for leaving a ton of projects unfinished.
Yeah, like so much unfinished business, right?
Exactly.
This is a guy who drove his patrons crazy.
Oh, I'm sure.
Left commissions just hanging and couldn't resist jumping to a new project before the last one was even done.
Yeah, and it wasn't just like a casual lack of follow-through. The Brain article that we have here points out that this was like a lifelong pattern for him.
Okay, so it's more than him just being, an eccentric artist.
Right, like he was genuinely struggling.
Give us some examples, like what kind of stuff are we talking about?
Okay, imagine this. You get paid a bunch of money to paint an altarpiece. It's one of your first big commissions. And then you just disappear.
You ghost them.
You ghost the client, poof, gone. That's exactly what Da Vinci did with the San Bernardo altarpiece.
Oh, no. Did that happen a lot?
More than once, yeah. Even the Duke of Milan, who hired Da Vinci for this huge statue project, he was so worried that Da Vinci wouldn't finish it that he contacted another artist as backup.
Oh, my gosh. What a lack of confidence.
Right.
I mean, this guy's famous now.
Yeah.
But even back then, people were, seeing this pattern, huh?
Totally. The novelist Matteo Bandello, he actually described watching Da Vinci work on The Last Supper. And then, all of a sudden, Da Vinci would just bolt in the middle of the day to go work on something else. And then, just as abruptly, he would come back.
So was this just, artistic temperament? Or was it something more? I mean, that's where this idea of neurodiversity comes in, right?
Exactly. And the Brain article specifically brings up ADHD as a possible explanation for these behaviors.
Wait, are we talking, ADHD as we know it today?
Yeah. I mean, we can't diagnose someone across, centuries.
Of course.
But the similarities are pretty striking. We know ADHD is often hereditary, and, it involves difficulty paying attention.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's more than that. There's procrastination, trouble finishing tasks, a mind that's, always wandering, and even restlessness. That's common, too.
Okay, I can already kind of see the connection to Da Vinci.
Right. Even as a child, historical accounts describe him as restless. And then his lifelong habit of, jumping between all these different projects, the bursts of work fueled by just short naps, it kind of fits.
Yeah, it does. But I remember from that article, they said that ADHD isn't always a bad thing, is it?
You're right. It's not. They actually argue that ADHD traits, when channeled effectively, can be a huge advantage.
Okay, so help me understand this. How can something that's often framed as, a disorder actually be a positive?
Well, that wandering mind that's so frustrating, it can also connect ideas in ways that, others just don't. It can fuel creativity.
Yeah.
And that restlessness, that can drive you to, seek out new experiences and really challenge the status quo.
Oh, okay, so instead of seeing it as this roadblock,
yeah,
it could actually be someone's superpower.
Exactly. And with Da Vinci, the article actually points to even more evidence. That suggests his brain might have been wired a little differently. So he was left-handed. And that's statistically more common in folks with neurodevelopmental conditions.
Interesting. So just being left-handed is a clue.
It's a piece of the puzzle. And then later in life, he had a stroke that affected the left side of his brain.
Oh, wow.
But get this, his language skills were completely fine, which means that his language center might have been on the right side of his brain.
Okay.
Which is unusual. And to top it off, his notebooks are filled with mirror writing and spelling errors, which could point to dyslexia.
Wow. Okay. I'm seeing a theme here. So how does all this relate back to Da Vinci's creativity, his art?
Well, research suggests that this kind of atypical brain organization, like being left-handed, dyslexia, unusual language dominance, it's more common in folks with ADHD.
Hmm.
But what's really cool is that these same traits are often linked to incredible visual spatial skills.
Wait, so you're saying there's a connection between these traits and artistic talent?
Studies actually show that people with dyslexia and left-handedness, they're often drawn to the arts. And they have a knack for visual and spatial thinking, which obviously is super important for artists.
Wow. That makes you kind of rethink the whole disability versus difference thing, huh?
Yeah.
So we've got all this evidence that suggests Da Vinci may have been neurodivergent.
Right.
But how did he manage to create such impactful work, even with these potential challenges?
Well, that's where this Novier documentary, Decoding Da Vinci, comes in. It really goes deep into how his scientific pursuits and his art were connected.
So it wasn't just a side hobby for him, like he was a real scientist.
It was more than a hobby. His scientific explorations, they really fed directly into his art. The documentary, it emphasizes how his obsession with optics and perspective, helped him create these incredibly realistic paintings.
So like, give me an example. What did he actually do?
Well, she studied how weather and atmospheric conditions could change the way we see things in the distance.
Okay.
And he used that knowledge to create the sense of depth and realism in his work that was just, like, unheard of at the time.
So he wasn't just painting what he saw.
Right.
He was painting what he understood about how we see.
Exactly. And that brings us to one of his most famous works,
Oh, here we go.
the Mona Lisa. Have you ever noticed how her smile seems to shift depending on how you look at it?
Yeah, it's like the mystery of that smile.
Right. And there might actually be a scientific reason for it.
Really?
The documentary highlights research from Margaret Livingstone. She's a neurophysiologist who studies, like, how we see.
Uh-huh.
And she points out that our central vision is really good for picking up details, but our peripheral vision, which is good for detecting movement, is blurrier.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this.
Her theory is that the Mona Lisa's smile changes because of how our peripheral vision works as our eyes move around the painting.
It's just like an optical illusion built into the art.
It is. Da Vinci wasn't just painting a smile, he was actually playing with how our brains perceive the world.
That's so cool. So we're seeing how his potential neurodiversity,
Right.
his scientific mind, and his art all kind of come together to create this, like, unique legacy.
And you know what? His techniques are still used by artists today.
Really?
Yeah, the documentary features a modern artist named Florent Farges, and he talks about how that meticulous layering of oil paint that Da Vinci used to create sfumato, which is that smoky effect,
Yeah, okay.
it's still being taught and valued by artists today.
That's amazing. But let's go back to the ADHD question for a sec. We've seen all this evidence suggesting he might have had it,
Yeah.
and how some of those traits could have fueled his genius. But, I mean, is it possible that it also held him back?
I think that's a question a lot of people struggle with today.
Yeah.
The YouTube video, Fearless Creativity, Leonardo da Vinci, and the ADHD connection really highlights this tension.
So they acknowledge both the good and the bad.
Exactly. They point out that while Da Vinci's ability to hyperfocus helped him dive deep into his passions,
Right.
his distractibility probably contributed to all those unfinished works. Like, it's two sides of the same coin.
It takes us right back to those frustrated patrons.
I know.
It's easy to just romanticize his genius,
Yeah,
but there were, like, real-world consequences to this, too.
definitely. It's important to look at both sides of the story.
Which brings us to this interesting point
Okay.
from the neurodiversity and creativity source. The idea of niche construction.
Oh, yeah, niche construction.
So for Da Vinci, was his lack of structure ultimately harmful? Or did it give him the freedom to, like, explore so widely in the first place?
It's like a chicken and egg situation, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Was it both a blessing and a curse?
I think so.
This is really making me think.
Me too. It reminds us that neurodiversity is a spectrum, and how it looks for each person is really complex.
Well, this has been great. I think this is a good place to pause for now.
Yeah.
We've already, like, covered so much, exploring the possibility of Da Vinci having ADHD, the connection between his science and his art,
Yeah.
and, like, the lasting impact that his techniques have had. And we've also raised some big questions about neurodiversity and how we define success.
Yeah. Is it about, checking things off a to-do list?
Right.
Or is it about the journey, the exploration, the ideas themselves?
That's a really great question. So when we come back, we'll continue this deep dive exploring Da Vinci's legacy and what his story teaches us about different ways of thinking. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, everybody. It's amazing how much we've already learned about Da Vinci.
I know, right?
But there's, still so much to unpack.
There is, and I think one of the most interesting things about his story is how relevant it feels today, especially with all these conversations about neurodiversity.
Yeah, we're finally starting to kind of recognize and appreciate the power of different ways of thinking.
But we haven't quite figured out how to create spaces where those differences can actually thrive, you know? We're still so focused on conformity, on everyone fitting into the same mold.
Which brings us back to Da Vinci. Did he succeed despite his potential ADHD? Or did those same traits actually contribute to his struggles?
It's a tough question.
It is.
I mean, our society has all these expectations about focus, productivity, following a linear path. And then you have Da Vinci jumping between projects, leaving these masterpieces unfinished.
Right.
It challenges everything we think we know about success.
It makes you wonder what would have happened if he had been able to conform, to just focus on one thing at a time. Would he have created even more groundbreaking work?
Right.
Or would that have stifled his genius? Just think about all those notebooks filled with these incredible ideas, inventions that were, centuries ahead of their time.
And so many of those ideas, they just stayed ideas. It's tempting to think, oh, maybe he could have achieved even more if he had been able to focus, to see things through to the end.
Yeah.
Maybe he could have actually invented the helicopter, the tank, the parachute, who knows?
But then again, maybe that constant exploration, that bouncing between disciplines, is what allowed him to make those incredible leaps in the first place.
That's true.
The real paradox.
It is. Maybe being a jack of all trades wasn't a bad thing for him. Maybe that's what made him a master in so many areas.
It really gets at the heart of what we're talking about with neurodiversity, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Traits that might be seen as weaknesses, distractibility, impulsivity, a need for constant stimulation. There'd actually be incredible strengths.
Yeah, it's all about perspective.
It's about how we frame these traits, how we create environments where people can use their unique cognitive style to their advantage. Imagine if Da Vinci had been labeled as, disordered, defective, because of his unconventional ways.
Right.
We might have lost one of history's greatest minds. Instead of celebrating his curiosity, his ability to connect the dots in a way that no one else could, we might have tried to force him into a box and, ultimately stifled his brilliance.
It's a powerful reminder that neurodiversity isn't about fixing people. It's about understanding and appreciating the diversity of the human brain.
And recognizing that those differences can lead to incredible innovations, amazing creativity, entirely new ways of seeing the world. So, what can we learn from Da Vinci's story? How can we take these insights and apply them to our lives and the way we support neurodivergent individuals today?
I think the idea of niche construction that we talked about earlier is really key here. It's about understanding your own strengths and challenges, and then creating an environment that allows you to thrive.
So for someone with ADHD, for example, that might mean finding ways to manage distractions, breaking down tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks, finding a support system that understands their needs.
Exactly. It's about figuring out how your brain works best and designing your life around that, instead of trying to fit into a mold that wasn't made for you.
And it's about encouraging society to embrace those differences, to create systems that support neurodiversity rather than trying to erase it.
Yeah, and the neurodiversity and creativity source, they made a really good point about how far we've come in terms of recognizing and supporting neurodivergent individuals. But we still have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. There's still stigma and misunderstanding, and there are still so many people out there who don't have access to the support they need.
And I think part of the problem is that we're still stuck in this deficit-based mindset. We focus so much on what people can't do instead of recognizing their strengths and their talents.
It's like we're fixated on this idea of a normal brain, and so we miss the beauty and the potential of what we perceive as abnormal.
Yeah.
But Da Vinci's story shows us that abnormal can be extraordinary.
Exactly. And it makes you question, how we even define success.
Yeah.
Is it about checking off every item on a to-do list? Or is it about pushing boundaries, exploring new ideas, leaving a legacy of creative exploration, even if it's a little messy?
That's such a great question. Da Vinci's life suggests that maybe a little messiness is okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's even necessary for true innovation.
Perhaps the real lesson here isn't about trying to fix neurodiversity, but learning from it, embracing it, and recognizing its power to make our lives and our world richer and more vibrant.
I love that. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I want you to imagine a world where instead of trying to squeeze everyone into this narrow definition of normal, we celebrate the unique cognitive style of each individual.
A world where a Da Vinci type of mind wouldn't be seen as disordered, but as a valuable asset.
Like, what kind of innovations, what kind of art, what kind of breakthroughs could we see if we truly embraced the power of neurodiversity?
That is an incredible thought. And it's a perfect transition to our final segment, where we'll explore some practical steps for embracing neurodiversity in our own lives and communities. Stay tuned. All right, beautiful chaos listeners, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Leonardo da Vinci.
And as promised, we're going to kind of shift gears a little bit, talk about what this all means for us today, 5 centuries after Da Vinci.
Yeah, because it's one thing to marvel at his genius and, wonder if he was neurodivergent, but how do we actually take these insights and do something with them?
I think it really starts with awareness.
Yeah.
Just recognizing that neurodiversity isn't a bug, it's a feature.
Totally. We've been trained to think of, ADHD, dyslexia, autism as deficits.
But like we saw with Da Vinci, these differences can actually be the source of incredible strength, creativity, innovation.
So how do we shift that mindset, both individually and as a society?
Well, individually, I think it starts with self-awareness. If you're neurodivergent, understanding your own cognitive style is key. Like, what are your strengths? What are your challenges? What kind of environment helps you thrive?
That's where niche construction comes in.
Exactly. It's about taking charge of your needs and actively shaping your environment to support those needs.
So for someone with ADHD, like we've been talking about, that might mean, finding ways to manage distractions, breaking down big tasks into smaller steps, seeking out support systems.
And on a societal level, we need to move away from this one-size-fits-all approach to education, to work, even social interactions.
Because honestly, our current systems are often set up to favor neurotypical ways of thinking and being.
And that can be incredibly frustrating and limiting for neurodivergent individuals. I mean, imagine a classroom where a child fidgeting is seen as disrespectful instead of a way to regulate their attention.
Or a workplace that values conformity and linear thinking, over creativity and outside-the-box solutions.
Right. That's why it's so important to advocate for more flexible, inclusive environments.
Environments that recognize and actually celebrate the strengths of different cognitive styles.
The neurodiversity and creativity source talked about the importance of assistive technologies and accommodations.
Like text-to-speech software for dyslexic individuals, noise-canceling headphones for those who have sensory sensitivities.
Those kinds of tools can be game changers. They allow people to navigate their challenges and really focus on their strengths.
And it's not just about technology. It's about fostering a culture of understanding and acceptance.
A culture where people feel comfortable disclosing their neurodiversity, where they don't have to mask their true selves to fit in.
Because when people feel safe to be themselves, that's when they can truly shine.
One of the things that struck me about the YouTube video was their emphasis on community.
Yeah.
They talked about how important it is for neurodivergent individuals to connect with others who understand their experiences.
Because it can be so isolating to feel like you're the only one who thinks differently.
Exactly. Having that community, whether it's online or in person, can provide a sense of belonging, validation, and support.
And for those of us who are neurotypical, it's our responsibility to educate ourselves, to be allies, to advocate for change.
We need to challenge our own assumptions about what's normal. Be open to different ways of seeing the world.
Because ultimately, embracing neurodiversity isn't just about being nice or politically correct.
It's about recognizing that our differences are what make us human, what drive innovation, what create a richer, more vibrant society.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge.
A call to action. I like it.
What can you do today in your own life to embrace neurodiversity? Maybe it's educating yourself, maybe it's starting a conversation, or simply being more mindful of the language you use.
Every small step we take can make a difference.
Because the legacy of Leonardo da Vinci isn't just about his masterpieces.
It's about the power of a mind that dared to think differently.
And it's a reminder that in a world obsessed with conformity, embracing our differences might just be the key to unlocking our greatest potential.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Da Vinci and neurodiversity.
And remember, beautiful chaos listeners, keep embracing the beautiful chaos of your own unique mind. We'll see you next time.